Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on day 2 here at the CCW April digital event. In this session, we are joined by Richard Kenny, Poly's Contact Center Marketing Lead and Contact Center Maven, expert and educator of longstanding David Hadobas. They are going to discuss their observations and predictions concerning video in the contact center in a refreshingly open, interactive, and slide-free conversation. If you guys have any questions during Richard and David's discussion, please feel free to drop them in our discussion chat. Any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to share or ask, please feel free to do so, but I will let Richard take it away.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sandy. And I just want to be really clear here that it's sort of the introduction from Sandy there described a maven and an expert. That's David. It's not me in this
I was looking at you thinking, where?
Uh-oh, we're maybe in trouble here, David. All right, so really what we're here to do to look at today is the role of video. I've been in the call center industry for 17, 18 years now, and I think for most of those, I've decided that video is going to be the future technology. And we've got a series of predictions that we've made over the last few years. And what I wanted to bring David in to do is discuss with us today the idea of, well, let's take a look at those predictions and let's see what's happening in real life out there. How are people using video? Are they using video in real life in the call centers? Metrigy, the research firm, is reporting nearly a 16% growth in the past year in the use of video as a component of customer interactions, which doesn't seem like a big increase at the moment, but that may be actually coming off a big number. So we don't know. So feel free to put any questions that you've got into the chat windows. Feel free to sort of interact with us that way as we go through. Sandy will be helping us with some of the questions on this today as well. We may get to the questions at the end rather than as we go through. So, David, one of the sort of first predictions or the earliest predictions about video usage is that it would really focus on high net worth areas, banking and finance, for example. As a starting point, has this proven to be true?
Well, I think those were the obvious initial places to kick things off. We've seen video chat with kiosks in the banking environment. Certainly when the bank lobbies closed, I think the load went over to those tools. Retail's another area that I think has picked up. Certainly technical support. We've all probably tasted a little bit of telemedicine, certainly in the last year. So I think as a backdrop, the last year got everybody comfortable with what it's going to be like to be on camera, internally, externally, family, friends. And I think we've kind of worked our way through 12 months of a dress rehearsal. So yes, I think those high net worth situations, we work with many members, companies like NetJets as an example. Certainly their member base is very high net worth. So I think that's logical, but I think it is starting to extend beyond that.
So do you see, well, sort of an additional point to add to what you've got there is that not only did the external world get comfortable with video through FaceTime and Zoom, etc., but with our call center employees suddenly dispersed, we had to use video to keep them together. So everybody internally kind of got used to video as well, and the technology got put out through the businesses. A lot of those sort of interactions that you described, sort of telemedicine, moving to kiosks, etc., are more about replacing a face-to-face interaction than a phone call. So is this a shift from a sort of real live in the shopping mall on the high street channel into the call center rather than a call center moving from a phone call to a video call, for example?
I would say that, well, let's see, you said 17 years. I've been in the call center space for 35. And certainly as technologies come out, the initial reaction is replace the phone call. Certainly that happened with IVR. It's happened with internet, social, email. You just keep naming it. I think all of these things continue to complement and extend customer interaction. So I think initially you're probably looking at, well, we talked about technical support. There are certain areas that are really ripe for screen share, video interaction, those types of things, so that the agent can have first look at the appreciation of what the customer is going through. that is obviously done very well face-to-face. But I'm not going to predict that the Apple stores are going to close and no one will ever go back in there, right? So I think this just extends it. And I think that most likely telephone remains that last place that everything ends up if all other channels fail.
Okay. And another idea, another sort of prediction around that is, again, some of those interactions that you've described, telemedicine really springs to mind to start with, is not an ad hoc call. I don't randomly ring up my doctor, usually to ask for advice. It's an appointment that's made. So are you seeing video being used as an appointment device, so as part of a scheduled meeting, rather than somebody ringing in with video or connecting in via video?
Yeah, I think initially that's exactly what we're seeing. We've had several of the CC&G members share that they would take the scheduled call with a high-end customer or possibly a group of people onto a video platform, Zoom, Teams, whatever, to really provide a little more concierge support. So the answer is that initially, I think that's exactly it. I think it's to be determined how it will unfold over time. And certainly telemedicine, at least in my situation, is I submit a request and it comes back, do you want to do this voice or video? So I have that option, but again, it's in the control of the user. I think that's a big part of the equation here. We have to start with what is the customer's preference. And again, we've been hearing about this, meet the customer where they are. So maybe the question is, will the customers start there and expect you to have that level of service? And that'll have an impact on how you roll it out.
That's a good point, actually. We always kind of end up as sometimes as vendors thinking we've got to push this technology to people and sort of make them use it. But your point is absolutely right about what does the customer want here? What's their preference on this? And we know we've seen from Metrigy stats again that sometimes more channels is better for customers because they give them more choice, they give them more preference over their interaction. So it is absolutely right of, and again, going back to some of the discussions we've had, a purposeful decision to sort of say, we know that this interaction will be quite good for video, so we'll give you the option of video here, rather than saying you can only contact us on video, for example.
That is exactly what's being discussed that I'm overhearing.
Okay. I'll probably summarize these a little bit more at the end here, but that one seems like the sort of really big one. Is it's high net worth, and it's probably scheduled calls rather than ad hoc calls. And maybe it'll replace face-to-face, maybe it won't. Like you said, it's probably more likely to be a broadening of the interactions that people use. The next prediction that we had, and it's probably a fairly recent one here, as I mentioned at the start of the call here, is that we've seen this large rise in internal team meetings carried out remotely. One survey in the UK said that something like 34% of call centers found that Microsoft Teams was their best employee engagement tool over the last year. And again, it might be worth seeing if we can draw out here the idea that that internal usage is making people comfortable. And will that drive external usage now?
To be determined. I mean, that's the straight answer. We've all gotten comfortable with it. So we're not going to be faced with longer call times for video types because the customer has no idea how to work the camera, right? Now, that said, if your customer base is 75 and up, and maybe that's the high net worth folks, that channel may not be as attractive as other channels. And we certainly have seen that over the years as primary choice of communication with the customer changes with, my kids are different than I was. I was the year of the 800 number. But certainly people who grew up with more face-to-face and phone might be a little more hesitant. That said, and again, I can use CC&G as an example here. When COVID hit, the first thing members did was say, what are we going to do and what is everyone else doing? Let's get a Zoom call or something like that arranged so we can learn from each other. And while nothing was accomplished initially, everybody figured out how to work their cameras. Everybody figured out what Zoom was. People wanted to be a part of something, even though they may not have ever used the application. So, virtual events like the one we're on right now, this is becoming an extension of what people have done face to face. So I think it's a TBD, but I think that our comfort over the last year with these types of programs and interactions is going to extend the reach of video. Absolutely.
Okay. In the sort of next step on, and we've seen this with I've seen this with one very early trial, does it change how we treat our employees when we expect them to go on video? So one of the early trials in the UK in a finance industry made very clear that these employees were different. They had uniforms on, they had very set backgrounds, and they were given different levels of training, specifically around eye contact, those sort of areas. So are you starting to see people just assuming that the employees know how to use video, or are there a set group of video-based employees that are getting trained in how to use this?
Well, again, I think the initial training was everyone being sent home, and then trying to figure out how to communicate internally using video. Again, many CC&G members in contact centers had advanced work from home programs, but not everyone was working from home. And then the next layer was, well, hold on, we've never had manager to manager communication from at home. So as we got through this dress rehearsal of what's appropriate, I think we worked through some of the bumps of the work from home environment. We had an executive with Polycom, and he shared with us that he learned through this journey that the room that he was in with his team was extremely important, because he might be in a home that has a nice extra room for these types of events, whereas an employee might be working in a bedroom. So certainly the environment, the quality of the equipment is very important. Dress code, I think it's an issue, and I think you have to set your parameters. And I think the background, I think all of those things are important, but it all starts with training. And I think those that have initiated these programs early on have had these conversations. We're all, the flip side of that is, Richard, that if your cat jumped in front of you right now, I don't think anyone's bothered by that. But a year ago, people might have been put off by that. So we've learned a lot in the last year, but I also think what's an appropriate interaction, and we let go of background noises and some of those distractions if we're accomplishing what we want. Does that help?
It does. Do you think that, yes, we sort of had that period of accepting what's in people's backgrounds, and we studied their bookshelves and all that sort of thing. Do you think we're going to start to see a swing back to this idea that, we're kind of over now, we're kind of the pandemic is mostly finished, we've got a healthy vaccination program going, you probably should be back in the office? So do you think that we're going to have this expectation that if we do have video-based employees, they will be in the office from now on?
I think initially, corporate culture is such that, and again, this is coming from conversations within CC&G, not just my opinion, but corporate culture, especially the ones that said, no, we're not doing a work from home program. Well, how do we know you're working? Security, privacy, all these other issues. As we've powered through that, I think it's that same mindset that says, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a controlled environment first. And that's probably pretty smart. But I think ultimately it extends into the work from home program. And I think it also becomes a notch on the belt of a work from home professional, saying, look, I understand background noise. I understand lighting, dress code. These are not things that I need to be trained on. I'm a professional. So I can think back of, it's got to be 7 or 8 years. I had my very first customer interaction, and it happened to be with Land's End. And it was over a retail purchase, and boom, it said, do you want to continue this in video? I said, oh yeah, heck yeah, I want to see what this is all about. And there was this woman, very polite, very professional. She had clearly a background designed by Land's End. And I said to her, I know you're probably recording this, but I'm just so curious. Are you working from home? And the look on her face told the answer. I don't think she was supposed to answer yes or no, but it was pretty. I think that initially companies are going to be more comfortable in office, and certainly the members that have shared their experiences, it's all been in office initially.
Thoughts just come to me here, and you may not have the answer here, but a lot of the surges and changes that we've seen in customer service or any businesses have been driven by a maverick taking it on. Is it Tony Hsieh? Or you've got someone like Elon Musk in the wider business world. Are we kind of waiting for a maverick to take on solely doing video call center or video customer service just because it works for their culture rather than it's profitable or it delivers the best customer satisfaction or any of those sorts of things? And we're going to have to wait to see what that maverick does and use them as a leading example.
No, I don't know that I have an answer to that. It would certainly help. I think people put those types of organizations certainly in spirit of high quality customer service. You think of Disney, you think of USAA, you do think of Zappos and others as kind of our leaders in the days past, Nordstrom's and Lands' End and others that really set the high bar for what customer service is. And being that customer service is a competitive differentiator. The question then becomes, is video a staple in the customer service offering? And am I willing to change brands or products or services? Cable's an easy one to get that. Cable's an easy one to pick on because people will jump for a $5 savings, right? So if cable support is traditional and maybe it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of stuff, and the competitor is right there looking right at you saying, let me help you walk through that diagnostic, I think that's a game changer.
Okay. So that one for me then is the idea that, yes, we've got a lot of internal team meetings and we are starting to see some form of external calls being driven by it, but it's likely to take place in a controlled environment first. I like that word that you called out there. So it's likely to be in some form of in-office environment where people do this as a next step.
Well, let me add to that, Richard. Just think of the individual who decided to record the video interaction that did not go well because of whatever the provider put out there. And then think about that going viral.
And how easy it is to share nowadays, yeah. On sort of that idea of something going viral then, and some of the times you sort of just get people's expectations not being met in customer service. Does video change any of that, for example? So a traditional thing that we do in customer service at the moment is we put somebody on hold, we go off to get documents, etc. Video has an expectation of not doing that. It has its expectation of being engaging. So do you think it would drive a change in our processes that everything's got to be to hand, or a support network has got to be there to help that employee deliver this engaging experience over video?
Well, these are certainly things that have to be thought through. And I think initially you're going to look at certain call types. So maybe you start with certain types of customers and then you look at certain types of customer requests. So I think it would be totally acceptable if we're trying to diagnose your problem and I click my camera off to talk to a supervisor and come back. I don't think anyone has a tilt with that. I think people would have a real tilt with you being put on hold or fake hold, right? Well, I'm not even sure what that looks like. I mean, sitting still. Yeah, I don't know. But I think there are certain types of interactions that this is just not going to work. But likely those are not interactions that are primarily needed, prime for video. So second part you said was having all those tools at my disposal. Yeah, I think this speaks to the type of agent that you're more likely to put out there. In our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, this is a tier 3 person, right? Who's kind of seen a lot of these types of requests and can certainly diagnose quicker without having to pause and look something up. But again, I'm not sure how comforting it is to have your support agent saying, "How can I help you?" And then you say, "What's your favorite color?" And they go, oh, hold on, I'm going to go look that up. And that's not a real good experience. So you're going to have to think of the call types, what's primed for video, and how prepared that agent is.
Okay. We've got to ask this. There's a dark side to some of this video activity. There's a big article that raised a lot of questions recently that people at home were being forced to have a camera with the idea that the employer was monitoring them. Were they in the room on their own? Were they doing something that wasn't normally allowed on site, such as eating or using a mobile phone, etc.? Should we use webcams to monitor some of these employees to look at their behavior, for example? Is that something that is permissible or even useful to us as employers?
Yeah. Now the classic line, I'm not a lawyer, but I've played one on TV. I think a lot of that's going to come down to what legal says internally in your organization and HR. But I see it in a couple of ways. In fact, one of our members shared that the reason they're wrestling with how they're going to put video into the customer interaction is the security of their employee. So there's a lot of angles on this. But Richard, we don't have to think that far back when, we were having the same kind of questions asked about recorded calls. You can't record the calls. I mean, that's okay. Look, you're working for us. We have a certain expectation of what you're delivering. And if we record and monitor what you're doing, I think that's well within the boundaries. Now, if during those times you've got kids running through and you've gotten up and left your video camera while you're trying to service the customer, this requires some training. So yes, there's that element of it. But unless people are required to keep their cameras on 24/7 waiting for a call to come in, which I think would not be appropriate, I think that there's plenty of room here for using it as a training tool, and just as we do with other metrics.
Yeah, I think some of it was the potential use of AI or ML to monitor people and pick up, if I'm doing this, I've got a phone in front of me, for example. So, but you're kind of right. That's a good grounding there that, we wouldn't expect this sort of behavior on site when you're servicing a customer.
Sure.
Why would we expect it at any other point? And focusing, engaging with the customer, we know delivers a good customer experience. So,
and we've tackled some of these things over the years, Richard. You think about when the cell phone was first showing up in a call center. Someone was bringing their cell phone. Again, initially, no problem because people weren't taking personal calls. But now the cell phone has a camera on it, and that's a different bird.
Well, it's also interruptions as well, isn't it? It's not just it was used to be there just in case you had to make a phone call. Now, notifications going off all the time, for example.
Well, one of the things that I read was, is this going to put an end to multitasking? I'm looking at you. Do you know that I'm texting under my desk? I mean, can I still do that? I have 3 kids and I'm pretty sure they can blindly text anything, but it is going to take away from multitasking that, having video versus non-video, because we've all been on those voice conference calls or webinars. Does anyone really watch an entire webinar with slides, or are they diverting to, wait for the good stuff, right? So yep. I think to some degree, it causes people to lean in, make good eye contact. You have a more personal experience. You're developing rapport easier. We've been hearing the word empathy for years and years and years. I think you can read empathy in someone's facial expression. So there's some big upside to taking your level of service to another notch.
So that kind of leads on to my last point here, is that video has been delivered, it's been talked about as being the channel that will actually exceed voice in terms of customer satisfaction because of all those empathy, because of that engagement and leaning in. I don't know if you've seen enough yet to know whether people who are trialing it have found that it does deliver that level of customer satisfaction.
I think it's too early to tell. I think people want to believe it. Again, I go back to the different levels of support. And so, my grandfather, when he wanted support, he was going to write a letter. My father, when he wanted high level of support. Boy, I'm driving down to the bank and I'm going to look that branch manager right in the eyes, right? For me, it was a 1-800 call. And then it was web self-service, right? So I think it kind of depends on who your customer is. But I think there's a whole lot of people that would appreciate somebody looking them in the eyes and saying, oh, first of all, thanks for being a customer, and we're so sorry you're having this trouble, but we're going to get you fixed. That could come across really, really, really effectively. Is it going to replace the voice call? I don't know. Did the IVR replace the voice call? Everything I've read said the IVR made more voice calls happen. Just we don't ask for our account balances anymore. So to be determined.
And I think that to be determined, again, is kind of a good summary of some of the discussions here, is that video is still fairly leading edge. We know where it will probably fit best, which is that high net worth, that engagement, that interaction that needs to be a high level of engagement. So you might look at bereavement lines, tier 3 support, anything that requires that high level of empathy and engagement. So none of that has really changed from some of our predictions, but from what you're saying, it's damn difficult. There's an awful lot of variables here to look at compared to any other technology. It's not going to replace anything that we've got before. It's going to be an option, like you said, that telemedicine one, of the idea of how do you want to see the doctor? Do you want just a web chat, or do you want a phone call, or do you want a video interaction? That's kind of where I see maybe the sort of the leading edge customers going, is offering that choice to their end users that are out there.
Well, I think there's one other factor, and the pandemic closed a lot of storefront businesses.
Yep.
We're going to reopen them. If I can do this through video, man, I didn't have to get in the car. I didn't have to find a parking spot. I didn't have to take a half hour to get there, half hour to get back. Now, I don't know. There's not a lot of organizations that function that way. But when you start thinking of retail, you start thinking of someone who's helping you as a personal shopper. You know, Richard, that's a great shirt. You know what would complement that? Here are 2 ties, right? So when you start thinking about what all you can accomplish that you would have accomplished in a storefront, add to that, maybe these storefronts aren't going to come back looking the same way. Maybe they're going to shrink in size or take on a different role. It's just stuff to think about.
Yeah, and I think financial is probably a fairly major one there, is again that the banks that have been the mainstays at the high street, the malls, etc., they're going to be the ones that need to go to this idea of video interactions first.
Yep. I don't know if you wanted to go to questions, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I will take a look at the screens over here. I'm going to pick one of these at random. I'm going to pick a difficult one. What are some specific examples of how video can add value to your contact center? I'll tell you one I've had recently, which was my car. I was driving my car, I hit a deer, and it's damaged the car quite extensively. And rather than trying to, I'd like to get his details, but he ran off. So the deer was well. But you know, I'd rather than ringing into the contact center, I'd like to say, I'd like to go onto the app, make an appointment to ring to someone. Here's a video. Here's a look around my car. They did it reasonably well. I had to take pictures and all that sort of stuff, but it would have been better to sort of say, okay, can you pan the camera to the left a little bit? Can you pan the camera to the right? And those sort of that video interaction, that for me would have made it a hugely better experience, rather than trying to figure out how to take photos, to upload those sort of things as well. I think that for me, that sort of insurance assessor seeing damages and having the comfort of somebody assisting me in that experience, that empathy that you mentioned earlier on, David, that the idea of, we're really sorry that you've had this accident. Are you okay? Let me have a look at the damage to your car, rather than just a sort of fairly soulless interface on a web page.
Well, and I'll be very brief because I know we're low on time here. We had to do an evaluation on a home for appropriate levels of insurance, and it turned out to be an entire video session. We walked through my whole house, and she still shotted whatever she needed, but we were talking face to face the whole time. Totally different experience than having someone in my house, which I didn't want to do, or just trying to do it on a phone call with pictures.
Yep, completely agree. And I think both of those two are an interaction that may have been face-to-face in the past, but is now better off as a video, especially kind of keeping distance from people at the moment as well.
Yep.
I'm going to wrap up. I think we are very close to finishing off there. So it would be great to carry on the discussion. If you want to connect to David or myself, you can easily find us on LinkedIn. We're fairly regular content creators over there. So feel free to reach out, connect, and ask us any further questions that you want to on that platform. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.